Two Republicans have won House seats in North Carolina. One was a replacement vote, one was a do-over vote. It's a little complicated. We'll get into all the nitty-gritty. But the big question is, was this good or bad for Republicans and Trump? And there's actually a good argument that it could be bad news and that it could be good news. Democrats thought they might be able to flip one of these seats because the margins in the polling showed it was getting narrow. But in the end, the Republicans win, which could show that Trump will hold this space, and it's good news moving into 2020. However, the Democrats did close a very wide gap from 12 points to 2 points, and so it could be good news that Democrats are gaining on Republicans, and the next year or so could make enough gains to start winning back seats in the House or defeating Donald Trump. We'll read through all of this, and I'll give you the breakdown of what's going on with Dan Bishop narrowly winning that special election, but I also want to talk about polls. Why are the polls so wrong? This was considered to be a test for Donald Trump. If the Republicans lost, it would have been very, very bad news, but they won, so there's a small sigh of relief. However, there's other news coming out about polls showing that it should have gone the other way. Trump then slams the polls. Rasmussen put out something really interesting about Donald Trump, the Trump campaign, threatening legal action against ABC, causing them to reverse a poll and come back with an inverted result. The reason this is interesting is that studies in the past have shown us that poll results can swing voters. And if people believe their side can't win, they won't go out and vote, which is interesting because all of these approval ratings and all of these polls keep showing Trump in the gutter, except Rasmussen. And Rasmussen accurately predicted the popular vote. Are they the only one telling the truth, or are they biased and trying to support Donald Trump? That's the big question. I can't give you all the answers. I can break things down for you and show you the research where they claim polls do this. So let's get started with the first big story, the victory in North Carolina for Republicans and why people are saying it is good news for Republicans. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com/donate to support my work. There is a PayPal option, a crypto option, a physical option. But the best thing you can do, just share this video. For a lot of reasons, YouTube deranks independent political commentary, which means I'm competing not only with the big giants like CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, but YouTube is helping them and hurting me. It's unfortunate. But if you think I do a good job and you like me better than them, just share this video to help overcome that obstacle. With your support, I can continue to grow and do what I do. Let's read. From CNN Politics. Yes, I chose CNN on purpose. Don't worry, I've got the Daily Wire right here. I want to show kind of a mixed view on things. Republican Dan Bishop narrowly wins closely watched North Carolina special congressional election. CNN reports, they say, in North Carolina's 9th District special congressional election, this gave Republicans a narrow victory in the GOP-leaning district, where President Donald Trump won by 12 points in 2016. The race drew national attention as a potential 2020 bellwether. In a district that stretched from the Charlotte suburbs to the military town of Fayetteville, Trump and Vice President Mike Pence both made 11th-hour trips to the district on Monday in an effort to bolster Bishop. The do-over special election came after the State Board of Elections refused to certify the 2018 House race results in the district after fraud allegations ordering a new election. Trump was not on the ballot. This is significant. I'll get to it. But Bishop's narrow victory in a race widely viewed as a referendum on the White House will provide a small measure of comfort to Republicans in 2020. Republicans normally would have expected to dominate in a district that Trump won, but data released to the public ahead of the Tuesday vote showed a close race, underscoring GOP troubles in the suburb during the Trump era. The president's approval rating in a number of recent polls is approaching lows not seen since 2017. I'm going to push back on this, but I want to show you this story from Politico. Why Republicans shouldn't breathe a sigh of relief after North Carolina win. Now, I want to make sure I stress this is very fair criticism. Do not underestimate the Democrats' gains in these places, but there is a potential explanation. I'm not telling you which one you should pick, but I just want to provide that nuance. They say, Republicans went all in to keep a hold of a key congressional district with a special election Tuesday, and they won, but they still have good reason to be concerned about the result. While the GOP can celebrate the election of a new congressman, Dan Bishop, his 2-point victory in a district President Donald Trump carried by 12 points in 2016 continues a worrisome trend for the party, which suffered heavy losses in the 2018 midterms and has not seen the political environment approve as Trump gears up for re-election. They say Trump cannot win a second term without improving his political position, and Democrats know it, casting Bishop's narrow win as a sign of progress in North Carolina. But hold on there. While you can fairly state that could be the case, I also want to point something else out. Trump was not on the ballot. That's important because many people believe Trump has changed the Republican Party. Old school GOP voters, some of them went to Hillary, some of them have left. And Trump invigorated new voters. That means the first time when Trump carries a 12-point lead in 2016, people are coming out for Trump. When it's Dan Bishop, Trump supporters might not come out for this guy. They don't know him. They like Trump. In which case, you don't see the support. So while it's possible to say Democrats are making gains in this district, it's also fair to say that Trump's new voters, people who hadn't voted before or independents and moderates who don't care about Dan Bishop, didn't show up at the polls. I read one piece of data. I know I've referenced this a lot. I don't have it pulled up. They talk about how I believe it was the New York Times, in 2018, Trump voters did not turn out. And that's bad news for Trump. They like the guy enough to come and vote for him, but not enough to come out and vote for general Republicans. Which means in 2020, if Trump's base comes out, I know I've said this a couple times in the past few days, they're going to check the R box across the board, and that's really, really good news for Republicans. That could be a reason why they may retake the House. But it's also possible the polls are right. Now, here's the thing. It's a very, very complicated circumstance. All the polls seem to show Trump underwater. They claim the Democrats are going to win. And it is a fact that when people see polls like this, they give up. If they think they can't win, they don't bother. Interestingly, many people believe Hillary Clinton lost because everyone was so sure she was going to win, they didn't bother. Perhaps the extreme ends of either poll can be bad news for a candidate. Showing a neck-and-neck race might be the most important thing. But I will stress, in my opinion, I think Trump supporters don't care about polls. That's why Trump won. They claimed he was a loser, he couldn't win, but Trump voters don't care. They're new voters. They don't care for the establishment. They came out to vote because they felt good. Trump supporters have been having a big old party the whole time. Now, obviously, they face like Orange Man bad in the media nonstop, but there's a viral video going around. Again, I don't have this pulled up. You should check it out. Where this dude got a massive MAGA hat and like filmed himself walking around. It's going viral because they're having a good time. They're proud. They like what they're doing, and they're going to show up and vote regardless of what the media tells them. But I want to highlight this. The Daily Wire frames it more as good news. And I don't want to just show these outlets saying it's bad news. The Daily Wire, obviously being conservative, says Trump passes test in North Carolina. Republicans win both congressional seats. From this perspective, it's fair to say it doesn't matter what the margins are. Republicans win, and if Republicans can win even by these margins in 2020, it's good news for Trump. That was the test. How are people feeling in the suburbs? Will people support Trump? In my personal opinion, I think all of this is irrelevant. I think Trump's voters, his supporters, don't come out for Republicans. Not many of them do. Some don't. Some just want to vote for Trump. So they're not paying attention to this stuff. 2020 will be a different story. The media is going to light up, and it'll be really interesting. But let's talk about polls. Here's what I really want to get into. Apparently, actually, I think it's here, or maybe, okay, there's a couple different stories. Daily Wire reports, want proof media polls are phony? Look at what just happened in North Carolina. And they highlight that Trump calls this out. I think they have the tweets from it. He said the other day, ABC Washington Post poll was the worst and most inaccurate poll of any taken prior to the 2016 election. When my lawyers protested, they took a 12-point down and brought it to almost even by election day. It was a fake poll by two very bad and dangerous media outlets, said. One of the greatest and most powerful weapons used by the fake and corrupt news media is the phony polling information they put out. Many of these polls are fixed or worked in such a way that a certain candidate will look good or bad. Internal polling looks great, the best ever. So here's the thing. I'm not gonna agree with Trump on this one. I don't think it's necessarily a conspiracy. It could just be, very simply, they're bad at what they do. Okay? There's a thing I like talking about called the Gell-Mann amnesia effect. You read the news all day, every day, and you think, hey, these stories are really interesting. I didn't know Trump did that. I didn't know Trump said that. Then all of a sudden you get to a story about you. Maybe your profession. Let's say you're a plumber. You find a story that says plumbers outraged over new law proposed in Pennsylvania. And you're like, wait a minute. I'm a plumber. I'm in Pennsylvania. You read the story and go, what is this? This is ridiculous. It's wrong. This happens to everyone when they read stories about something they're interested in or good at or themselves. For the longest time, Wikipedia, my Wikipedia claimed I invented a Zeppelin. No idea why. It's so ridiculous and absurd. The Gell-Mann amnesia effect refers to people seeing that story, assuming the news is true, until they see a story about them, realizing the news is fake news and it's bad at what they do, turning the page and completely forgetting. The simple solution is thus. These companies are polling wrong. They are polling wrong. They're not calling the right households. They are not working with the internet, and they're ignoring the areas that Trump targets. If Trump goes to one area and says, vote for me, and then they poll in a different area, it wouldn't make sense, would it? Now, I'm using that as a metaphor. What I mean is when Trump goes online and rallies support across the country, where do you then call? Who do you call? What business? What age group? It seems to me that the polls are wrong. Now, it's possible. It is entirely possible there is a conspiracy. I don't like to entertain that because extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Regardless of that, however, it is true that polls do swing votes. And that's what I was getting at earlier. I will show some of this data coming up in a second, but I want to make this point. Rasmussen reports, they typically show a more favorable outcome for Donald Trump. The latest Rasmussen job approval from the 8th to the 10th has Trump at a 47% approval rating. Not great, below 50, but way better than all these other polls. Look at IBD Tip at the end of August had Trump at 39. Politico Morning Consult just a day earlier on the 7th to the 8th has Trump at a 43. Here's what's interesting. Rasmussen tweeted this out the other day, talking about how polls, the incorrect polls, responding to Donald Trump's tweets. Let's read this. Rasmussen said, "We recently published some 2016 national polling comparative work for the final months of the election. The ABC Washington Post late 2016 polling track record taken from Real Clear Politics is one that we review. What is new today is that we now know that the Trump campaign threatened legal action against ABC WAPO after their October 20th to 23rd of 611 likely voters, D+12 poll. 7 days later, they reran their survey, but this time with 1,125 likely voters, yielding a Republican +1 result. This was a 13-point flip in about 1 week towards candidate Trump, who had never led in their late 2016 national polling. The almost double-sized sample and likely other factors apparently had a truly remarkable impact." Now, you're going to have to convince me that either the poll was wrong, or let me rephrase this. Okay. They're arguing that something happened, or I would say one of the arguments is that something happened in 7 days that caused 13% of people to decide to vote for Trump instead. So either that poll was wrong, some profound, moment happened that got Trump a huge surge in the polls, or the poll, when I say the polls are wrong, I should say it's either something happened or the polls are wrong. Okay, that was terrible. I apologize. What I'm trying to say is the way they conduct their polls was bad. They changed what they did. It clearly wasn't the result of some major news incident. That would be absurd. Rasmussen said, "Not to be outdone, the Associated Press immediately followed the ABC WAPO D+12 with its own October 20th to 24th survey of 1,212 likely voters showing D+14. D+14, they say with an exclamation point. No word as to whether they received a similar legal gram from the Trump campaign. The AP then never released a final 2016 election poll, not an uncommon phenom from some of the media's most promoted gold standard pollster names. ABC WAPO did make a final popular vote margin election prediction, Hillary Clinton by 4. Hillary Clinton then won the 2016 presidential popular vote by 2 points, precisely as we told our readers she would. With all of this above as a subject update, here then is the link to our recent 2016 race polling analysis. The point is, if they thought Democrats were going to flip this seat in North Carolina, if they thought Clinton was going to win by 4, if they thought Democrats initially would win by 14, but they were all wrong, and Rasmussen got the popular vote right, and Rasmussen currently holds Trump more favorably than any other poll, maybe Rasmussen is correct and everyone else is wrong. Many people have stated, however, that Rasmussen is just biased, supporting Donald Trump and being more favorable to him. But I gotta admit, if we're going to avoid the conspiracies, okay, I'm not going to pretend like CNN. Look, I think CNN doesn't like the president. I think that's fair to say. But I'm not going to pretend like all of these other polls are purposefully trying to manipulate popular opinion by convincing people Trump can't win. I think they're just really, really bad at what they do. I do think there are biased people at these companies, but for the most part, they're bad at what they do. If we start from that standard, no conspiracies, no intent to deceive, then we're left with one conclusion. Rasmussen was right in 2016, and so therefore I would rather bet on Rasmussen being right today than any of these other polls that were wrong, especially ABC News Washington Post. But here's what I want to show you. Take a look at this. Now this is just this study right here looked at Canada in 1988. This is just one bit of data, but there have been many other studies that have shown this to be the case. They say, in this study, it's from University of Michigan, we have assessed the impact of polls in the 1988 Canadian election through 3 different approaches. First, a campaign pooled data analysis. I'm not going to read you the nitty-gritty. I want to say, the findings emerging from these 3 sets of analysis converge on 4 main conclusions. Polls affected voters' perceptions of the various parties' chances of winning. That one's obvious. Polls affected the vote. That's interesting. Polls affected strategic voting, as some voters became less inclined to support a party whose chances of winning appeared slim. Polls did not have a contagion effect, since voters did not come to evaluate the parties and leaders who were doing well in the polls more positively. What we can see here, the negative polls about Trump, at least according to this study, would likely make people not want to turn up and vote. That could be a reason why they, were seeing a 12-point lead from Trump in 2016 drop to a 2-point victory margin for the Republican. But we also have a story from 2014 from the Washington Post. Opinion polls can be self-fulfilling prophecies. And it's not just about Trump, it's about literally everything. So when they come out and claim that everyone is supporting the Green New Deal, then apparently people will hold a bias and they'll support it because they want to be like everybody else. But instead of taking my thoughts, let's just read this story from the Washington Post. It's from 2014. They say, public opinion sometimes changes quickly over relatively short periods of time. For instance, support for same-sex marriage has substantially increased to becoming a majority view over the past few years, while support for the death penalty has been steadily declining. These rapid shifts are the product of people actually changing their views rather than just cohort replacement, younger people replacing older ones in the population. What causes the opinion cascades? Obviously, new information about policies and position taking by political elites play a role. But people may also change their opinions by observing their fellow citizens. When they learn from public opinion polls that majorities in favor of public policy are growing, they may jump on the bandwagon and also support these policies. This could be because they want to feel liked or accepted. They could be learning from the wisdom of crowds, or they may want to resolve cognitive dissonance by supporting what will most likely become the policy anyway. In addition to polls, there are numerous other sources for people to learn about collective opinion, such as aggregated forecasts and prediction markets. These recent phenomena have raised the question of whether the measurement of public opinion can itself influence public opinion. So they go on to talk about a bunch of results. But let's read this. They say, the effect was not constant across issues. We observed the highest effect for the free trade issue, 13.5 points. So let's skip the nitty-gritty and read this. We offer 3 related suggestive reasons why this is the case. People are more likely to start out ambivalent on the issue of free trade, making them more susceptible to new information. So I apologize. They're talking about polling people on specific issues. I jumped that because I just want to talk about the results. So keep that in mind. People were unsure of existing public opinion on free trade, meaning that the polling information had more of an opportunity to have an effect. Free trade is not defined as much along partisan lines, and people have weaker partisan predispositions on the issue. Hence, learning about majority opinion can cause attitude shifts, but the effects are strongest among people without well-defined prior support who are previously uninformed on public opinion, and if the policy question is not highly partisan. Take that data. What does it mean? Independent, uninitiated individuals. People who don't care for any politics and don't watch are looking at the polls and seeing that everybody hates Trump and are likely to go, yeah, okay, I'll vote against him. Maybe that's why people believe there is a conspiracy to put out fake polls to smear Trump. And it's really strange that Trump threatened legal action and they changed by 13 points. It could just be the companies are bad at what they do. But in the end, I think there's only one thing that matters. For some reason, even with this being true, even though we know polls can shift opinions, even though the polls say Trump is doing bad and they say Trump can't win, Trump still won. He still won in 2016. Something happened. Apparently made a lot of people really, really angry. I can only assume the same thing will happen again in 2020. I mean, why wouldn't it? Trump's base is growing. The economy is doing really great. And they keep saying all these really bad things. But Rasmussen was right on the money with the popular vote. So I'd bet on them. And they have Trump's approval rating at 47 as of the past few days, just a couple days ago. In which case, Trump's approval rating is much higher than many of the Democrats, and especially Congress. So will Trump win? Whether or not North Carolina is a real test of whether or not Trump can win, I think based on what we saw in 2016, based on everything I've just presented, I think the answer is yes. So the reason I highlight the polls and manipulating opinion is not to claim a conspiracy, quite the opposite. I don't think it's a conspiracy, but I do think it's fair to point out the ineptitude of media is misleading people. Their failures to accurately poll people and understand what's happening is misleading people. And it's swaying opinion, and it is bad for our democratic constitutional republic. And I mean democratic because we use democratic voting institutions to elect officials to represent our republic. I know everyone's going to get mad at me for saying that. Okay, whatever. I'm done. You get the point. Republicans are breathing a small sigh of relief in North Carolina. So we'll see what happens. I don't know if the test really mattered. Trump voters are going to come out because they like Trump no matter what anyone else says. And the Democrats, you better consider this. Next segment will be coming up at youtube.com/TimCastNews at 6 p.m. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all there.